My name is Casper Rongsted, and together with Anders and other people, another guy called Casper, and a fourth guy called Casper, and four people, we have a company called Nordic Schools. I've been a teacher for many years, working with children with learning difficulties, but also working in state schools. And this is my colleague Anders.
Hey, I've been working in educational technology for many years in Denmark and Sweden, and now I'm a school consultant like Casper, and I'm also working at a primary school here in Copenhagen.
So this is the guy who's got his fingers in the real world, not me. I mean, I haven't been teaching since, I think, 2004 or something. Anyway, so every day we go to schools in Denmark or abroad, and we visit school children and especially their teachers. And we do a lot of education development with them and professional teachers development. Today, we'd like to talk about what are the reasons for the success of the Nordic school system.
And then we'll like to prove this with some research, and we'll show you some facts and figures, not so much, but just a tiny bit.
And we'd like to talk about the values of the schools in the Nordic countries that we heard the word Bildung just before from you, Anna, and we think that Bildung is a part of the values of the schools in the Nordic region.
And then you talked a lot about curriculum before, and we would like to talk about how do you take academic skills and the curriculum and combine them with the students' well-being.
And of course, then we'll like to focus on social competence. And referring to what you just said about TALIS 2018, I think some of the skills there will go very well with the things Anna said about TALIS 2018. So we'll talk about social competence and why it's so important for us.
And then we'll show you our Nordic teaching model, which is our way of summarizing what makes a good teacher or pedagogue.
And actually, it's a bad question because we write, can one point to a special Nordic teaching model? Well, yes, we think so because we made one. So we'll show you that later on. And then we'll have a little inspiration for daily teaching practice combined with the teaching model. But let's move on. If we can. Well, there we are. We just wanted to say that like Anna talked about, we're very inspired by international research, and we think we've been working for many years in taking the most important bits of the international research and bringing it out to the school teachers. It could be different in other countries, but we've experienced in Denmark and Norway and in Sweden, not in Finland, but in the other three countries, we've experienced that the research is not being taken out to the teachers. There are newsletters, but instead the research is used to just bang the teachers in the heads and say you're not doing it well enough.
Yeah, it's only all the bad news that are being used by different politicians or school board members or parents to say you're not teaching them enough math or enough Danish or whatever.
So since 2014, we've been traveling around Copenhagen and abroad to say, so can PISA tell us of good news, and what about ICCS and ICIILS? So let's just say that for those who have forgotten, PISA is about reading, mathematics, and science. And we won't go into the specific countries and so forth, but we'd like to say that actually a lot of these countries are doing what President Obama called punching above their weight. So you can see that for example, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and so forth, Denmark even, Estonia, and so forth, are doing really well. So the Nordic region is doing quite well, which means for us, it means that you can say that we're very good at working with the children's well-being, but also do that hand in hand with the academic skills of the children in reading, mathematics, and science. Now, this was quoted by Anna, and I was very happy to see that, because actually when we ask people to raise their hand if they know this study, I think 3-4% will say, yes, we know it. So if we do a seminar, we ask people, does anybody know ICCS? They will just look down to the floor like we gave them very difficult math teaching because they don't know it. So what we think about this is it's interesting because it actually answers some of the things that people wanted to hear, teachers wanted to know from the TALIS 2018. We think it combines soft skills with hard skills. And it's very interesting to see how teachers work in different countries with democracy. And of course, we're pretty proud because Denmark has been number one in 2009 and 2016. But that's actually not the point. The point is that the way teachers work in the Nordic region is a way of involving students. So we know that, for example, a lot of, in this country, Denmark, 49% of the time in school you work in groups. Yeah. And we also know that the teachers really try to cultivate the students' involvement, and that's an important point.
Yeah, and we don't just teach about democracy, we use democracy when we teach, and that's a real important thing for us and a lot of Nordic colleagues we talk to.
Exactly, and this is a Nordic point, not just a local Danish, but a Nordic point. And then this one, sorry, I'll just move on to the next slide. ICILS is about using computers, coding, and stuff like that. And also here, the Nordic region is doing very well. We just wanted to point your attention to this because it really shows that, well, in some countries we have a problem, for example, Denmark or Sweden, we have problems with the girls. The girls think they're not very good at using computers, but in real life they are. So they have the skills, but they do not believe they have the skills. And I would invite you to look into ICILS. It's from 2018, the last version, and came out in 2019.
And you talked a bit about the pandemic before, and this study also is like, it shows which countries were best to adapt and cope with this pandemic. And if you look at Germany, for instance, they really had trouble converting their school to a digital school, where in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, it was much easier because the system was there, the kids were ready, the parents were used to it, and the teachers had it as a daily thing to use technologies and digital materials.
And I think Anna also talked about how we lifted, those teachers who are not very happy. I mean, my own computer is from 2011, so it's quite old, 10 years old computer. Can you beat that? It's amazing, isn't it? But I sometimes have difficulties. I'm also 53, so I do understand the teachers who have difficulties. Luckily, I have this young man who's only 40, and he can help me. Point being that we lifted the teachers like me, we lifted those teachers in the whole Nordic region. So actually today, I think every teacher will say, Zoom is no problem, Microsoft Teams is no problem, I can teach there, I can share things and so forth. So it's just to say that we're doing really well in the Nordic region. So we think we can point to three basic values in the Nordic schools, meaning the Nordic region and the schools in the Nordic, in Estonia, Lithuania, and so forth, Iceland, Denmark, Norway, and Finland. And those three values are trust.
And then we minimize the distance. And this is one of almost one of the most, it's the funniest thing when we talk to American or English teachers, because we're not on a surname basis, we're on a first name basis, with our teachers and our kids. And when I say I don't remember what my math teacher in primary school, what her surname was, they are shocked, most of them. So that's a simple way of minimizing the distance between the teachers and the students. And then, of course, there's all the dialogue, as Anna mentioned, on social media, and we have a thing called Aula where parents and teachers can write to each other, and it's easy to get in contact with each other.
And then we cultivate social competence, which is, of course, part of the trust, part of the minimizing of the distance. And that's in teachers, and it's also in the students, and we'll get back to that.
The trust part, and this could be in Norway or Sweden or Estonia, almost everywhere in the Nordic countries. This is a picture from CNN, and perhaps you've seen it before, perhaps not, but this is a farmer selling strawberries and flowers at the roadside somewhere in Denmark. And where the trust part appears is it's not being watched. There's just, you can mobile pay, or you can just leave the money in a small till. And the farmer trusts that the customers will pay 10 Danish kroner for a kilo of potatoes if that's what they need. And he'll just come and collect the money at the end of the day.
And interestingly enough, it was part of the election campaign a couple of years ago here, where they said, this has changed, you can't do that anymore. And then research showed, yes, you can, it's still out there. So maybe 1 or 2 were robbed, but normally you can just trust that the money will stay there, which is quite interesting. And then if we look into, the World Value Organization, they have a survey every 5th year. And if you put together the Scandinavian countries, and we do apologize to the other countries, but it's just the numbers we have. The Scandinavian countries, when asked the question, do you agree that most people can be trusted? 76.3% of people will say yeah. So a lot of people will say yes. Whereas in Brazil, 6.5% will say yes to the same question. And Australia is also lower than it is in the Nordic region. So still apologize to Iceland and Estonia and Lithuania and so forth. But just to say that trust is part of the society, which is also part of the way we teach. So in the school, when I said before that we have group work 49% of the time, this is new OECD figures that just came out. And when we do that, of course, you have to trust the children. Everybody knows group work can be terrible because, somebody's working, somebody's not, sometimes. So you need to trust the students, and you need to trust that they can think for themselves and they can work for themselves. And this is cultivated, we think, in the Nordic region, because we want the students to be able to think for themselves. We've been quite a few times to England, especially southern England, Plymouth area. And over there, we experienced many times how the teachers will instruct what to do and then keep on instructing. So they will say, you have to cut the paper like this, and then it will show it, and then it will control every student. Whereas in the Nordic region, you would say, okay, you have to cut it like this, and you have to go from 1 to 2 to 3 and 4. And then the teacher might go around in the class, but they will still trust that the students do what they say. And it's not because we're naive, it's because we cultivate the students' independent thinking. And the source for that is ICCS 2016.
And this is an interesting thing as well, comparing the Nordic schools with the English school system. Who does the talking? And right now it's us. But normally we're
being bad teachers.
We're being really bad teachers. But normally in a Danish school, we would probably just talk about 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of the lesson, then 5 minutes in the middle, and then 10 minutes at the end. So you can see here there's quite a lot of difference between who does the talking. And the students, they talk in the classroom and they talk to each other as well. So this is another way of really showing a difference between what do we do in the Nordic schools compared to Anglo-Saxon or English school system.
And this is also, it's always shocking the English school teachers and school leaders we work with, because this is numbers from John Hattie, and you can say, oh, it's not true. You can also say, but there might be something about it, So we think it's actually quite an important difference between the Nordic school systems and the English school systems. And then in some countries, I'm actually not sure about Lithuania and Estonia. You'll have to tell us later. But we know that in the Nordic countries, there is less curriculum and more general school law, like the Finnish Minister of Education just said half an hour or maybe an hour ago. He said that, it was interesting to see how that developed during the pandemic. But it's such an important thing for Danish teachers and teachers in the Nordic countries, that we can cultivate our own thinking and we can also find our own learning methods. And that's really something that is so different from countries that are ruled by curriculum and where the specifics for the teaching is much different. And we can see it in combination with the children's well-being, for example, that in the Nordic countries, we have more time to cultivate the well-being of the kids because we can be more free about the curriculum or what we have to teach them during the school year.
Yeah, and it's pretty obvious that you need teachers that are happy to get children that are happy. And if you say, okay, we have a small curriculum, or we have some things you have to read in Danish, for instance, or have to study in history, but the rest is up to you. Then you get happy teachers who can use all their academic skills and all that combined with their social skills.
And especially if you do like in Finland, where the teachers have a lot of time together to work together. that's beginning to happening in some of the other Nordic countries, but it's a great idea. And Anna, you talked about that too. We'll just jump to this quote. This is a Danish philosopher called K.E. Løgstrup. And what he's talking about is that when you are with someone else, you have an influence on this person. I mean, everybody could tell you that. But what's been interesting is this is something that's been massaged into the brains of teachers, since the 50s, 56, where this quote was from. But what's so important is that the research today will tell you the same thing. So the importance of the teacher, and of course the importance of the parent, but the importance of the teachers has to be underlined. And it's in cultivating social competence and in cultivating academic skills and so forth, that the teacher is so important. And K.E. Løgstrup was one of the first philosophers to talk about this. He was talking about an overall human skill, but we're talking about it with teachers. Now, this is something totally different because this is the very specific tool.
It's called UPV in Danish. It's about whether or not the children are ready for an education. And there's a lot of debate about this UPV in Denmark right now. But basically, they get a grade, and then from year 8, the teachers start talking with the children and the parents and each other. What do you want to be when you grow up? What's your next educational step? And then they look, okay, what are your personal preconditions? Are you motivated going to school? Do you come in stable, and are you ready? And they look at their social preconditions. Can you collaborate? Do you respect others? Do you have tolerance, as Anna mentioned as well? And then they use their practical skills and their workshop skills, and whether they're able to perform at that next level they're going to. And it's being debated in Denmark right now because we want more. The teachers say we want a better evaluation. We're happy with this, but we want to change it so we look more individually at the kids.
We think this is underlining the way we think in the Nordic countries. Whereas if you look to Germany and or maybe Britain or maybe France, it would be different. They will not have this variety in the questions they ask to the students. So we think this is really so interesting, actually. And it's interesting that there is a debate now where people say it's not enough. Whereas when we show this to English schools, they say, wow, this is mind-blowing. We've never seen anything like it because we don't have time to do that. And actually what English school leaders we had visiting from Midlands a couple of years ago, they said that they wanted to take these questions that we sent to them in English, and then they wanted to ask them secretly to the students. So when they had meetings with the parents, they would ask the questions secretly. So they would still cover the personal preconditions, the social preconditions, and the practical subject skills. So just to say that it is possible to implement it in other school systems.
And they do a similar thing in Sweden where they write an assessment on each child.
So the second value is to minimize the distance. Pictured here, you see one of our big heroes. He's called Per Fibæk Laursen, and he is the author of more than 45 books. So if you're a teacher in Denmark, you will know who he is, maybe even in Scandinavia. Anyways, he's the one we're quoting saying, in the Nordic schools, we work hard to minimize the distance between the teacher and between the student. And we systematically try to understand every person. So we're not only in charge of a group, of a class, we are also in charge of a sum of individuals, a lot of individuals, and we try to create some kind of contact to every individual. We think this is such an important part of how we work in the Nordic countries. And we think this is something then when we are under pressure from politicians and other people who want to change things and reform things, we have to remember to have time to cultivate the social competence that we'll get back to, but also that we have time to minimize this distance because it's all about knowing the student. Now, this is a picture of my brother and my son. So it's not a teacher and a boy. When this was taken years ago, I just thought this is really how a teacher could be with a child in every country. But we think that in the Nordic authority, that teachers are not dictators as they are in some other countries, I'd say. They are learning partners. And that's something totally difficult. So actually, I think the difficult part in teaching in the Nordic countries is that you sometimes have to shut up and then you have to let the children talk. This is why we became educational consultants, but then we can still talk. Anyway, we think this is an important part of how we see ourselves, that we want to minimize the distance, we want to talk, we want to start a conversation with every child in our class, and not because they are learning partners, and not only something somewhere we have to take them from here and then to there.
Because there's a test or an
Exactly.
SAT score or something.
And actually, we could talk a lot about testing because we do much less testing in the Nordic countries compared to, for example, the American or the English school system. Now, I think we might need a heads up on the timing. How much time do we have left?
Well, you have, let me see, you have just a second now, you caught me. I think you still have some time, which is till 3 o'clock, so our time. So we have about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. Is that okay?
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
We'll just continue. Thank you very much.
Actually, now that I think of, no, you actually have less. I'm sorry. We still have some discussion to have because right now you are just discussing between the two of you, but we need more discussion time because the topic is really interesting. So let's wrap up in 5 good minutes, and then we'll have till 3 o'clock. We'll have a bit more discussion. Okay?
Thank you very much. We'll do that.
Thank you.
So this is to show you about minimizing this distance, that we ask the students other questions than, do you understand mathematics? We also ask them, how do you get friends? How do you keep a friend? What do you like about school? And this is something that's different in the Nordic countries, that we actually go into something you could call a more private space.
Yeah, and we make student plans with these private spaces and set up goals where we can improve the children's well-being.
Exactly. And just to go on to the third subject, now this is an X, because the trust is also in the way we cultivate social competence. So 2 years ago, we had British school leaders visiting Denmark. In one school, there was an X lying around because they were outdoors doing some outdoor
It wasn't lying around. It was like that. It was in a chopping block.
That's true. It wasn't just lying around. That's true. So anyway, it was on a chopping block. And these teachers and school leaders say, what is happening? This is crazy. We can't believe what we're seeing. And then the guy called John, actually, guy in charge of the campfire, children sitting around, said they know how to use it and they know when not to use it. So it was just there. And they were really, really impressed about that. And I think that's part of the trust. It's part of minimizing the distance. So he knew the children there. So he knew he could do that, John. And also, he wanted to cultivate their competence, their social competence in, well, I can use my empathy in understanding, can I do something with that X now or not? So what we do is we focus on social competence and we focus on students' well-being in our teaching during the lessons.
Yes.
I think, Anders, I just wanted to say one more thing. Sorry. No, it's all right. It's just that we also test the well-being. So for example, in this country, in Denmark, we have a test. And it's been debated a lot because what are they asking? But still, to give it so much light that you want to test the well-being. So for example, children who are 9, 10, 11 years old, I think it's really good. And it shows that most children in this country like to going to school. And I think you can say that about most of the other countries, I guess. I'll just say that this is one of the a PhD from a woman called a writer and PhD and school educational consultant called Louise Klinge. And the most important thing there is the bold thing. So a relationship is important between the teacher and the student. And of course, it's different when they're 6 and they're 16, but it's still extremely important. And her research shows that vividly. So we have to remember that. Sometimes we think, oh, it's only kindergarten or it's only preschool, but it's not. It's in every school year. And I used to be a teacher for kids who were 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 years old. And I mean, I remember the best teaching I did was when I cultivated the social competence in myself and in them, of course.
And then this is the famous Nordic Teaching Model, where Casper and they're all my colleagues are called Casper. They looked at research for many years, and then they summed it up with these 3 competencies: the teaching competencies, classroom management competencies, and then social competencies. And in each of these competencies, there are 4 different categories.
And let's just say, because we haven't got time, let's just say that social competence, as you can see, is just as important here as, for example, planning competence. So it's just to say that we really think that social competence is extremely important. And this model can be downloaded for free from our webpage.
Yeah, and the reason there are numbers on each category and from 0 to 5 is that we use this with teachers and pedagogues, where they fill out how well are they at planning or building relations with each student, so that they reflect on their own competencies in these 12 areas.
So you could say it's the Finnish way of doing self-evaluation, because in the school system in Finland, they have a lot of time to do self-evaluation and to collaborate, whereas in the other countries, we have less time. But still, the Nordic Teaching Model is something for you to use. Now, we hope that you've learned about some of the reasons for the success of the Nordic school system,
the values of our societies and schools,
and a little of the research to prove this. We're just touching it.
Yeah, and again, just touching how to make academic skills go hand in hand with the students' well-being.
For example, with the UPV, and why social competence is so important for us in the Nordic countries.
And then we just briefly showed you the Nordic Teaching Model that we could go on for hours about.
And we hope that all this can inspire your daily teaching practice. I know that most listeners are maybe not teachers, but then I hope you can give it to teachers. Now, the next thing, called nordicschools.app, is something to... Now, these are my notes from what Anna said. And talking about the TALIS 2018, they were talking about pedagogy for soft skills. They were talking about how to tackle multicultural classrooms, how to make learning communities, peer-to-peer learning, and how to work with the well-being of students, and how to make parents involved. Some of the questions we try to answer in the nordicschools.app, and it's our brand new platform that we built for collaboration between teachers in the Nordic countries, well, all over the world.
And pedagogues.
And pedagogues, of course, which is something we have here at least.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what we'd like to do is to invite you for the Danish version, which is a beta version. We also have an English version, but it's only the articles that are in English. The rest is in Danish. We're working on that. And when I'm saying that is we want to create a forum where teachers, researchers, and so forth can share practical teaching methods, but also insights, like a lot of the things Anna just said. I'd love to record it and put it on our platform, because it really makes sense for teachers in the Nordic region and abroad. So I think we need a platform where we can meet and do these things. And it's not Facebook, it is a platform, and we manage what's on the platform, but we would love to collaborate with you. So if you want to collaborate with us for materials or funding or just collaboration of some kind, please write us on info@nordicschools.com. And this is Casper and Anders Peter saying, thank you for listening. We look forward to hearing some questions.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for this lively presentation and your very interesting points and the presentation of the model itself. I've heard a lot about it, but it's always good to hear, other people present it in slightly different way and sort of present their perspective. So thank you very much. And the first question we have in Slido that I want to ask is, would Nordic model of education be possible without emphasis on equality in societies?
Well, I think so. I think you can take out things, but of course, it's also inequality is such an important thing in the Nordic countries. But I think you could go to, for example, we've experienced a lot of visits to England, to England and from England, where you can say equality is not at the same level as here, and it still makes sense for the British teachers and school leaders. So I think yes.
And a lot of them, they want to have this equality with the children, but the system isn't ready for it.
But it seems like sometimes the critique of this, type of approach comes from the fact, well, some say that kind of most motivated and those brightest students then are kind of brought back to the more average level. And that's the sort of challenge that we are facing, sort of that, everybody becomes kind of mediocre. Is that
I love
criticism?
that. I used to be a politics teacher, so I love that, because I think sometimes it's true that you can't read that because you have to follow the others. So I think actually sometimes it's true, and then sometimes I think it's not true, because I think every classroom I've been to in the Nordic countries and in other countries, I think every teacher wants to balance the motivation of the brightest, and then to take those who have difficulties in their subject and lift them up. So what I've seen is brilliant teachers using all forces in the classroom.
Yeah, and what helps here in the Nordic countries is that we haven't got this very strict curriculum where, for instance, in England, the joke is that the Minister of Education, he can say, oh, it's Tuesday, 12 o'clock. So now they're having about the tutors all over K-12 or K-4 or something. But our loose curriculum let the teachers choose subjects that motivate children. But it's a huge debate in Denmark, because for the last many years, we focused a lot of the children that needed help. And we've forgotten all the gifted children, or how do you call it? But we're focusing more on it in Denmark as well.
I think that there have been the last 10, 15 years, a lot of talent programs. And one municipality very close to where we are in our office here in Copenhagen, they said, well, we're not deciding who's a talent. You're deciding if you feel like you're a talent, and if you know something or you're very engaged in something. So if you really love maths, then you can go to a talent camp. So it's not your teacher saying you get A level, you can go to a talent camp. It's yourself who think, well, I don't know everything about this, but I really want to engage in this. And I really like that approach. So I think that would be the Nordic response to that.
Obviously is trust. And, but if you look actually at numbers in other countries, for example, Lithuania as well, Latvia, trust levels are smaller, much smaller than in the Nordic model. And it seems to me like trust is something that is a much more fundamental feature of the society. So you cannot just sort of come and say, okay, well, let's trust everyone now. That doesn't work in that way. So what are the ways that, trust can be enhanced in the classrooms, like specific ways or practices that you encounter and that you feel are sort of, good ways to really do that? I guess one of the things that you mentioned is sort of giving more time to students. Is that more space, more voice to students?
The sad part about the answer is that a lot of researchers think that the trust we have in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway dates back to the Viking era. So it takes more than a fortnight to get this trust. But I think when it comes to the trust in the classroom, it all depends on, for instance, leaving the kids to work alone. A lot of small things where the children realize, oh, he trusts me. Casper trusts me for 20 minutes sitting here working, or he trusts me to choose which topic I want to do or which assignment I want to do first. So there's, at the beginning of the school, there's all these small things where we can let them decide, and we can show that we trust them in deciding what's best for them.
And we have 10 years where we can cultivate this.
Yeah.
I mean, in this country, the kids go to school in 10 years. They do in most other Nordic countries. So 10 years where we can cultivate this, I think that can change the society. So of course, there are some historical reasons for why the Baltic region could be different. But I think the way your path the last 30 years has shown that, of course, it can be cultivated in your classrooms, because the teaching is world-class.
Yeah. And an important part is the parents. Because if the teachers and the parents have a good relationship, the students will see, okay, my mother and father, they trust my teacher, then I trust my teacher as well.
That's an important point, because I mean, what's important for the parents to say is that they don't call the teachers at home idiots and stuff like that, so the kids hear that. So you need a relationship between the teacher and the parents, and we haven't had time to talk about that, but of course that's an important point.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the questions that we have now in the Slido platform. And Anna Sophia is asking, what about the role of parents in education? And so you just sort of touched upon it. But another question is also relates to this kind of cooperation between educational system and parents on the other hand. So how do you see that? It seems like, you know, what you were starting to say is that it has to be a very sort of tight connection here.
I think in practical terms, if you go into a school in this country, and I know in some of the other Nordic countries too, you can just go into the school. So you can, I mean, I know the teachers of my daughter who's now in 8th grade because I go into the school and sometimes pick her up and then I chat to the teachers. So I don't need a visitor's badge like we do in other countries. I don't need a visitor's badge. I can just go into the school. Interestingly enough, the school is not crowded with parents who want to talk with the teachers. Actually, this works very well. So I think the specific contact between the teacher and the parent is so important. And you can do that in many ways. But one way is to be allowed to go into the school and talk to the teacher and just say hello.
Yeah, and before the pandemic, it was a common thing in Danish preschool and the early years that the parents, they came in for the first 10 minutes before the bell rang and then talked a bit with the other children and with the teacher, and the teacher could talk to the parents about pets or whatever. And we invite them to come see school plays, and we involve them when the children have something to present. And a lot of times teachers write to parents, we're going on a field trip for the Viking Museum or something. Who would like to come? And then, yeah.
For the Viking Museum.
Yeah, and
every Monday.
Every Monday. But in my kids' class, we almost fight about who gets to go to the theater, who gets to go to something, because we're being involved. But the trouble is, and you talked about the children being left behind before, the parents are as different as children. So some parents are really well at adapting to the school and helping and all that. And some parents are basically not and need a lot of assistance. And some parents are too strict or too hard against the school and want more and more and more. So yeah, it's a balance, but it's an important balance to manage as a teacher.
And the relationship building between the parent and the teacher is so important. I mean, we haven't had time enough to talk about that, but of course it's so important. And you can do that formally and informally, and I think you have to do both things.
Okay, I see more questions coming in, and I want to ask a few more to just put them right in front of you. So one, Simona is asking, how can increasing individualization in our societies influence trust and distance between students and teachers, and thus drive to changes in the Nordic model? So is the Nordic model static? Is it changing due to the sort of changing values in society and maybe growing individualization in general? Do you see that?
I think in our model, the response has been to say, under social competence, we have a category called category 10, and that's about the social, the relationship between the teacher and the whole group, the whole class. Category 11 is about the relationship between the teacher and between every student. So one student, one student, one student. And category 12 is about strengthening the relationships between the children, the students in the class. So we really work hard to create a community where the teacher is sometimes not needed, where they can, when they have a break, when they do group work, they can solve their own conflicts. So I think in the Nordic countries, I think our society model and our school models are strong enough to live through the individualization. And I think every teacher we meet, they want to create strong communities in their classes.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that when it comes to materials, you could use IA, artificial intelligence, and make materials for each and every one of the children that are there. But we've seen parts of it being adapted in Denmark for the last 11 years, but it hasn't really taken on because the children, they want the group, and the teachers want the group, and the parents, more important, they also want the group. And from Asia and America, teachers look to the North and the Nordic countries to see how do you perform so well. And that's why we always start out by telling about the research, because the research shows that the Nordic way of teaching is, quoting Casper, probably the best way in town. So hopefully it will survive, but it's not static. That's very important. Teaching should never be static. So it can evolve, but I don't think it'll ever be focusing on the individual.
On the other hand, if you look even at these kind of more, collective models or, more different societies like China, for example, they would look, or Singapore, they would look and say, Nordic model. Yeah, what about our model? We are doing quite well in these ratings. And that I relate this comment to a question also that says, okay, so now there is a lot of emphasis on communication, social skills, on all these soft skills. Aren't you devaluing, the hard skills, the actual academic skills that at the end of the day should matter the most?
But if you look into the research, we can't stop you. If you look into the research, you can see how well the school systems do in, for example, PISA. So I think you can't say that we're not doing very well in say, mathematics or language or reading. So I think you can say that we're doing well, but we're also emphasizing the well-being and the social skills.
And you can teach all the hard facts and the curriculum so that they can manage a test. But you can also use all the hard skills and let them collaborate about the hard skills and let them use all the hard skills in a design process or in creating something or being working together, solving problems instead of just learning about the hard skills. So it's not A or B, it's you have to unite them.
And I think ICCS has some important lessons talking about cultivating independent thinking. And you can find that in Singapore, and you can really not find that in China. So that part of their school system, I would not like to import.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I was just, by no means I was implying that, some is better or much better than other model, but I was trying a little bit to push you to think about, and to give us some insights about, this sort of different countries and their experiences, which been great. So thank you very much for your presentation and for your answers.